Well, I've done this video a couple different times, and I've promised myself that this is going to be the last one. I'm really working hard to try to get this video under the 15-minute mark for you guys. Um, so in this workshop, when I show R code or when I share R code with you guys, I'm usually going to be doing it within the RStudio environment. So I thought it would be appropriate for me to give you a little peek at what RStudio is and what it looks like. And I'm also going to provide just a couple of reasons why I like using RStudio to develop R projects. For starters, RStudio is an integrated development environment for R. And so you may remember from a couple videos ago, I talked about R, the language, and using that language, we can pass instructions to our computer. And I also talked about some tools that we can use to deliver those instructions. So RStudio is one of those tools. If you are coming from a heavy Stata background or a heavy MATLAB background, this may be a little bit different in that with Stata and MATLAB, the language and the tool, the user interface, are kind of one and the same. R is a little bit more like C or Java, where there's the language and then there's a lot of different tools that you can use to develop code in that language and pass that code to your computer to get it to do things. So RStudio, in a very oversimplified explanation, is just a tool for delivering R code to our computers. And the RStudio folks would definitely hate me saying that because RStudio is a lot more than just a tool for delivering R code to your computer. It's a very powerful tool for developing good R projects. And I use it because it makes my life easy. For starters, I'm going to show you where you can get RStudio. There's a download page. If you pop out to the Googles and you punch in RStudio download, it will take you to the download page. And the download page is pretty self-explanatory. There's a free desktop version, and if you hit the magic button, you can download the distribution that's appropriate for your system. And at this point, I should say that almost everybody I know has been able to execute this process with very little friction. RStudio usually downloads and installs pretty easily. I'm sure that because I said that, I've jinxed us all and I've guaranteed that someone is going to have serious problems with this download process. But in my experience, there's very little heartburn involved in downloading and installing RStudio. So once you do, you can open up RStudio and it looks something like this. It's a nice tiled layout where you have a scripting window on top and you have an interactive console on the bottom. Up in the top right, you have some information about the workspace that you're in, the objects that are in your global environment, and down in the bottom right, you have another tiled window with several panes, one of which gives you information about the resources that you have within this project. So the project is the default unit of organization for RStudio. So when you open up RStudio, it will generally open to the last project that you had to open. And one of the things I'd like to start with here, I'll clear this so we clean things up a little bit, and I'll remove these existing variables in the workspace. So we just start with a clean workspace. And one of the things I want to show you here is our home. So RStudio, again, is not R. You'll download a version of R to your machine, and then you will download RStudio, which is a tool that sits on top of R. So it needs to find your version of R. But I want to be clear, when you download RStudio, it generally is able to find your R interpreter without any intervention from you. So without any setup or any direction from me, RStudio knows where to look for the version of R that I have on my machine. And I know that it has found my R version because I can ask it what version it thinks it's using, and that's 4.0, and I know that I've upgraded recently to R 4.0, so I feel quite confident in this setup. So this is going to take me to the first of three things that I love about RStudio, and the reason that I use RStudio exclusively as my R development environment. I like the way it looks. I think that if you are coming from a Stata or a MATLAB or an SPSS background, this experience is probably going to be pretty familiar to you. You get a lot of information about the projects you're developing, and I really like this environment. So if I do the same exercise that I did a few videos ago, passing some R code to the interpreter, hello world. I can echo that command. So this is just pasting that string value back to the output window. If I instead had assigned this to a variable, so if rather than echoing it back to the console, if I had assigned it to a variable, I declared x to be a string value that's going to take the value hello world, welcome to R. I get some feedback about that object in my global environment. And if I add a few more, objects, I'll make z a numeric vector just for a little bit of variety. I get that feedback up here in my global environment, which is something that I really like about this setup. If I toggle over here to the default R console, and I remove everything from, I clear the workspace out, I can do the same thing over here, X. And I can do the same variable declaration, but I don't get the same visual feedback about the objects that are populating my workspace. For completeness, I should say that I can retrieve the active objects within the current workspace in this environment by using this ls method, but I prefer this layout here. So that's one of the reasons why I use RStudio, and the second reason why I use RStudio a lot is that I use R Markdown documents a lot, and the RStudio development environment provides a really nice integration with R Markdown, which is a document type that I really like. First thing I'm going to do to illustrate this document type that I was just telling you guys about is inside my project here, and I'm going to open a new file. So I'm going to go to the file insert icon here at the top, and the first file type that I'm going to insert into this project is an R script. So this R script, you can think about this like a text file. This is just a place where you can write R code, and you can run lots of lines all together. So if you wanted to bind several chunks of code together to do some type of analysis, you could write that in a script. And another type of document that's available to you in RStudio is a Markdown document. And let's call this Markdown practice. And Markdowns, R Markdown files are really popular. As I said, they're particularly popular for folks that need to do automated reporting because you can combine narratives, so you can have longer text-based narrative, and you can combine that with code that does some operations. In this case, there's a line of R code here that summarizes a data set that's internal to R. R has several kind of toy data sets that it comes with that you can use for practice, and one of those data sets is called cars, and this is a summary method on that data set. So to just kind of illustrate a little bit what's happening here, I'm going to copy this over into my script, and I'm going to show you first kind of what this line of code does, right? So if I highlight it, and in my RStudio environment, if I run that line of code, it's going to summarize the cars data set. Again, head is a method that's going to print the first few lines of a data set. So just driving home the point that this cars object is just a data set. The summary is just summarizing it. And then going back over to my markdown document, there's one of the things you can do with a markdown document is that you can render it to a couple different file types. And here we have this designated as rendering to an HTML document. And so if I knit this file, again, this is stuff that we're going to go over in a lot of detail in the workshop. We've set aside plenty of time to talk about markdown documents, so please don't think that I'm just flying through stuff that you will never get to revisit, because that's not the case. So if I save this within the project, again, it will render a document. And in that HTML document, we get the text-based narrative that we had before, and it echoes the R code that is embedded in that document. And then we see this familiar output, which is the output from the summary method. So again, I don't want to beat this to death. Basically, all I'm trying to show you is that these markdown, this file type called the markdown document, is something that I really like, and it is a feature that is really easy to work with inside the RStudio environment, and that is one of the reasons, going back here, one of the reasons that I use RStudio as much as I do is that RStudio makes it very easy to work with these markdown documents, which I think are fantastic file types and great resources. So just wrapping up here, the third thing that I really love about RStudio is that I organize my R code into projects. And as I mentioned before, the project is kind of the default unit of organization within the RStudio environment. And I think that there are a lot of benefits to organizing your R work as projects, and RStudio makes it really easy to do that. I'm not going to get too deep into this one because I think that RStudio projects is a really important workflow topic that deserves kind of an extended treatment. So I'm going to put this one off for a separate video. And just to wrap up here, the things that I really like about RStudio and the reason why it is my default development environment for R code. I really like the way it looks. I like how it's laid out. I like the aesthetics, and I like the way that it presents information to me. And secondly, I really like how easy it is to develop R Markdown documents using RStudio. I don't feel like we need to try to convince you of all of the great reasons and all of the really convincing reasons to use RStudio right now. I think those will become clear as we progress through the workshop, but I'm letting you know about some of the reasons why I like RStudio now rather than later, because I do think that RStudio can be a powerful tool to help accelerate your R programming, and I think the sooner you get started with it, the better off you're going to be.